Yo, what's up beautiful people of YouTube? Welcome to Dom's Media Zone. In today's video, I'm going to be going over the preferences section in Canon's Digital Photo Professional 4. Now the preferences section, or the settings section if you prefer, has all the settings that you can apply in order to customize and change your Canon DPP4 around to suit your needs. Now it can get a little bit complicated, so I've decided to make this video and go through each and every setting in the preferences section so that we can better understand how to use the preferences and how to set them up. Now there are quite a lot of these preferences and this is a bit of a lengthy video, so what I've done is I've divided it into the chapters or into the pages that you can see in the preferences tab. So feel free to skip around the video and go to any section that might interest you the most or might be the most helpful to you. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it and I hope you enjoy. Alright, welcome everyone. Today I'm going to try and explain the preferences tab in Canon's DPP4. So all the preference options, we're going to go through each one of them to see if we can make sense of them. So firstly, to begin, to open the preferences, you need to be up here and you need to click on tools, and then right at the bottom you've got an option that says preferences. You can also use the shortcut key Control K on your keyboard, and by doing that it will open up this preferences window for you. Over here on the left hand side of the preferences window, you'll see that it's got 7 different pages that you can access, and each page will have its own settings. So we're going to go through each one of these today and try to explain every single setting. Okay, so to begin with, we're looking at the startup folder over here. What this does is it lets you select what folder you want to default as being open when you start DPP4. So for example, if I select last folder displayed, and you can see I've got this Canon 90D photos folder with my Beddington photos over here. If I close Canon DPP4 now and then reopen it, it will start up with this folder being selected. If I choose specified folder, I can tell Canon DPP4 to basically start on a specific folder each and every time. So for example, in this case, I could use the photos folder because that's where I keep my photos. Up next, we've got a save recipe setting. So this setting over here, you can see it's got 2 options: display message when adding file or add file automatically. What this setting does is, let me demonstrate because that's the easiest thing to show you. So if I go into edit one of my photos over here, so I'm going to click on edit image, and what I'm going to do is just adjust something. Let's say, for example, I take the brightness up a little bit. Now, as you can see, I'm going to go back. And now this little symbol shows you that some of the photo settings have been changed. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to close Canon DPP4, and you'll see this photo message pop up which says, is it okay to save this image? Yes or no. And this is the message that that setting's talking about. So if I say cancel over here and go back to the preferences tab, if I say add to file automatically and say okay, and then if I close Canon DPP4, I will no longer receive that message. It's just going to assume that I said yes to save it. So let's go ahead. And there we go. Canon is closed and the message wasn't there. Now I've reopened Canon DPP4, and as you can see, because I had that option specified folder selected in the beginning, it opened on that photos folder. So going forward, I just want to leave it at the last display folder. Now up next, we've got a movie file playback option, and over here, it lets you select which utility do you want to use to open the movies with. So if you've got a movie file on one of these folders that is compatible with DPP4, you can say play with DPP4, and what that will do is open your movie file in the photo preview window basically. Now you've got an option to change it to play with EOS Movie Utility. To do this, you would need to download special software called EOS Movie Utility, but then also it's only compatible with selected camera models, not for all of them. So my Canon 90D was not one of those that are compatible, so I haven't installed this. Right, and the last option over here now is play with the default application, and what this does is it will try to open the movie with DPP4 firstly, but if it's a movie file type that cannot be opened with DPP4, it will use the Windows default application or whatever operating software you are using. So in this case, I've got Windows, so it would probably use Windows Media Player. All right, up next, we've got something called receive files from the EOS utility, automatically focus on a file received. Now, this is one of those settings where I thought it would be quite obvious and easy to use, but it wasn't. So I've used the EOS utility, I've opened it up, and I tried to download photos using EOS utility, and having this selected, I thought what it will do, it will automatically focus on that folder where the EOS utility downloaded the pictures. However, it did not work. So whether I checked it or unchecked it, it didn't do anything. So this is one of those settings where I really couldn't figure out what it's supposed to do. It's nothing about it in the Canon DPP guide, and I just couldn't get this one to work. So if you do figure this one out, do let us know in the comments, and please do share with us how you got this working. All right, the next setting we've got is this default value of output resolution, and you'll see over here that you can choose from DPI 1 to DPI 60,000. Now, this setting controls what will be set when you are converting your RAW files to your JPEG or your TIFF images when you are saving, and the DPI means dots per inch, so this refers to the physical dot density of an image when it is reproduced. So the higher you set the DPI, the larger your files will be, so it's worth mentioning that. So for example, to produce a good A4 type of print, if you're printing your photos out and you want to print it on an A4 piece of paper, you should use around 300 to 600 DPI to get a really good quality print. So anything that's bigger than an A4, you might want to increase that a bit, but by default, this is set to 350, and I don't print a lot of my photos, so I'm just happy with this output over here. All right, then we've got these things called the temporary files here. So these are files that get stored when you're editing your photos or when you're working with DPP4. It's got a temporary folder. Here's the destination path, and this is where all the temp files are being stored. Now, you can delete the temporary files that were created, and this can improve your operation speed if this is getting full. So here's the maximum available space on the disk that I've designated to use the temporary file. So for example, I've given this computer 4 gigabytes of space to store the temporary files. So if this starts getting full, you can see I'm using very little right now, but if this does start getting full and you've used up the all 4 gigabytes, what will start happening is DPP4 will start putting in the new files, but then deleting the oldest files in that 4 gigabyte space allocated. So it's good to keep an eye on this if you want your program running a little bit faster, and you can always delete your temporary files. And it does tell you here it will improve application responsiveness and restore to the original state. So I'm going to say yes. And there we go, it cleared everything. And this is the cache memory that's used. You can go ahead and clear that as well if a lot is being used. Now, if you make any changes here, you can always reset them to go back to the default. So that includes the folder destination. So if you wanted to point your temp files to a different folder, you can go ahead and click browse over here and change the folder where they are being stored in. All right, let's continue to the next page, which is image processing 1. So there's 2 for these, image processing 1 and 2. We're going to start over here. Now, the first setting here is JPEG image quality. Now, it gives you a tick box where you can tick it, and it says remove block noise and mosquito noise. So this setting lets you improve the quality of the JPEG image by reducing the noise particular to JPEG images. This setting is also effective when RAW images are converted to JPEG images and saved. Now, the guide does tell us that the higher the JPEG image's compression rate, the better are the effects. And the lower the compression rates, the noise reduction might not be noticeable. I've done a test using this setting where I saved a picture, I saved a RAW file with this unselected, and I saved a RAW file with this selected, and then I zoomed in on both of those, and to be honest, I could not see any difference. So maybe your JPEG compression needs to be extremely high, but I didn't notice any difference at all. All right, the next option is the modified picture style settings. So what this does is if you check mark this box here, retain settings of each picture style, settings such as color tone, color saturation, contrast, unsharp mask sharpness, and other options will be retained for each picture style. Now, by what I mean by picture style is that's coming from your camera itself. So in your camera, you've got different picture styles you can choose from. You can choose like standard, portrait, landscape, neutral, faithful, monochrome. So on there's individual properties such as contrast and sharpness and color tones and things. So if you do set the setting to retain it, Canon's DPP4 will get the photo exactly with those settings from your camera. All right, the next one here is preview image settings. I'm going to demonstrate how this one works because this is a bit of a weird one. I don't really see any situation why you would want to use this, but I'll explain this anyway. So it basically select this to show the stamp editing status on all preview screens. Clear to show stamp editing status only on the stamp editing screen. So to use this, let's go to the stamp editing tool. So I'm just going to pick a folder again, and let's go ahead and find a nice photo that's compatible for this setting. So let's take this one here of this daisy, and I'm going to say edit image. Now I'm in the edit image box, and here's the main preview window. It's under this box here, which is the basic adjustments. So what I'm going to do is select the stamp editing tool over here and let the image load up. Right, so now that this image opened up, I'll show you what I mean. All right, so to demonstrate this, I'm going to say select copy source. I'm going to make the radius much bigger, and let's select a bit of this flower here, and let me copy the flower over so that it shows two flowers. Okay, and there we go. There's a second copy of the flower created in the stamp imaging tab. Now, if I go back to the preview, the basic adjustments tab, you can see that we can still see the two flowers because that setting is selected. Now, if I go back to my preferences and image processing 1, if I uncheck this and then say OK, you'll notice that the flower now disappeared and it's not available in the main preview window. It's still available in the stamp editing tool. There you go, but it's not available in the main preview windows. So that setting basically hides what you've done in the stamp tool from the preview window. And when you save your photo, it still will have that setting applied. So it's kind of weird. I'm not sure why you would want to use this setting. So I just leave it as selected because I want to see in the preview window what I've done in the other tabs. All right, up next, we've got the noise reduction defaults. So over here, you've got apply camera settings. So in your camera, you can apply some noise reduction defaults. So here you've got the option to keep it straight from the camera, or you can set your own defaults that DPP4 will use. So for example, I could change this to like 7 and this to 7. And then if I save this, every image that I edit with DPP4 will have this noise reduction default automatically applied. Now, if you don't know what the difference is, the luminance noise and the chrominance noise, I've got some good videos. I'll put the links down below. But basically, the noise can be split into luminance noise, which is kind of like a little gray noise. It looks like the old black and white TV kind of noises, if you've ever seen those. And the chroma noise is the colors noise. So you'll see like colorful dots. That's the noise. I've got a picture up here on the screen just so you can see the difference between the two. All right, the next option is the sharpness defaults. Now this works very similar to this one. You can either keep the camera setting or you can set your own. Now you'll see here there's two different ones. There's sharpness and unsharp mask. I've got a video about sharpness as well. I will put some links in the description, but basically the sharpness option, you can either choose the sharpness default or the unsharp mask default. You can't use both. It's one or the other. And the sharpness one, what it does, it's like an overall sharpness adjustment where it will adjust, it will make your images a little bit sharper. And this one here, the unsharp mark, this one's a little bit better because it lets you control the sharpness a little bit more. So you can still do the overall strength, but then you can add things like the fineness, so make it a little bit more sharper. And then you've got something called threshold, which basically when you apply sharpness, it introduces some noise into a photo. So this kind of blends that noise out and counter affects the noise produced by the sharpness. So you can set your defaults over here. And that's what we've got in the image processing 1 page. Now we're going to move on to image processing page 2. All right, the first option in image processing 2 is the quick check window settings. So over here, how the setting works is your quick check window is this button over here. It allows you to quickly preview a photo that you've got. So you can select a photo, press quick check, and it will open it up just to let you do a preview and see the information about it instead of going into the edit image tab that takes a bit longer to load. So you can see there's two options here, show original image and show image with recipe applied. Now what this will do is I've got the show image with recipe applied selected. So if I go and edit one of these images now and change things about it, and then I do a quick check on it, it will show me the image with the recipe applied, meaning with whatever I've already changed, it will display on the quick check. If I set this to show original image and I do the same and I say quick check, it will show me the picture without the settings applied. I can demonstrate this for you, but keep in mind that when you want to change these options, in order for them to take effect, you need to restart Canon DPP4. So I've got this one, show image with recipe applied selected. So let's go ahead and pick an image. Let's say this one. And all I'm going to do is scroll down and I'm going to just change something so that we can see a visible difference. Let's just do something like that. All right, you can see it's kind of more like washed out now. So if I come out of this and then if I click on quick check over here, it will open this image up and you can see my recipe is applied to the quick check display window. So all the changes I've done are reflected here. Now, if I come out of this again and if I go to my tools, preferences, and what I will do is I'm going to change that setting to show original image. I'm going to hit OK. And then I'm going to restart Canon DPP4. All right, now I'm going to select this same photo again. And if I do a quick check on it, you can see it displays the original image without the effects that we've applied. So that's what that setting does. It's up to you which one you prefer. I probably just prefer to show the image with the recipe applied so I can see how it looks after I'm done with it. Alright, so the next is the graphics processor settings. Now it says use graphic processor for image processing and use graphic processor to speed up the preview and display. Now today I'm using a different laptop than I normally use, so I don't actually have a dedicated graphic processor installed, so you can see that this setting is not selectable. The laptop I normally use is my gaming laptop. It does have that setting on it. So I've got an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1070 graphics card, and I've done a test with the setting selected and with the setting unselected. And to be honest, with the setting not selected, so with the graphic processor not helping out, I got 18 seconds, and with it selected, I got 17 seconds to open an image in the stamp tool tab. So I've barely saw any difference by using this. Maybe you've got a different experience with this, but for me, it made absolutely no difference at all. All right, then over here, you've got the default size when opening raw images, and you've got a couple of options here: original size, or shrink the area to 66%, or shrink it to 25%. And it says this applies to display of compact CR3 files and to resizing when images are converted. So what I did read up about this setting is it's applied to raw images with that CR3 extension that was shot with the C-RAW, which is compressed raw function selected on the camera. Now this specifies the size default when these raw images are opened in DPP. So this default size is also set when raw images are converted and saved to JPEG and TIFF images. So DPP needs to be restarted for this to take effect. So basically what it does, you can kind of decrease the size of the photos that you're importing into DPP4. This might actually make the software work a bit faster, but you might be losing some of the quality. All right, the next setting is called HDR PQ image quality settings. And it says here you can disable it from version 4.1040. Applies to images captured with EOS 5D Mark IV and EOS R. So these are the only two cameras that it applies to. Basically, they've introduced an image quality enhancement thing that's called HDR PQ mode. And it's been introduced in version 4.10.4. And what it does is it enables the camera to produce high dynamic range images conforming to the PQ specifications, which are called perceptual quantizer specifications. It's a transfer function that allows HDR display by replacing the gamma curve used in SDR. So this one is really complicated. I'm not even going to pretend I understand that. That's what I got in the guide. And basically, it's just something to do to enhance image quality for these cameras, which I don't have. But if you do have, maybe you want to leave this unchecked so that it improves your quality. Okay, up next, we've got the color management tab over here. All right, in the color management tab, we've got default settings of the work color space. Now, to explain this one, it's similar to like monitors, like your TVs and smart devices and computer monitors. They display color in the RGB or red, green, and blue color space. So that means that they use red, green, or blue lights to display all colors by mixing these three colors in different levels to give you a single color. Now, a color space is a useful tool for understanding the color capabilities of a particular device or digital file. So in simple terms, this is a method for the monitor to display the colors that will match what is printed. So the goal is to get the colors you see on the monitor as close as possible to what the photo colors will look like when printed. Now you can select the color space from over here that will be applied as a default setting of raw images from these 5 types over here. So this color space will be applied when the raw file is converted and saved or printed. You will need to restart DPP if you change one of these settings for it to take place. Now I'll quickly show you a picture of the different color space and what each one of them is. So you've got the sRGB, which is your standard color space for Windows. It's mainly used as a color space of monitors, digital cameras, and scanners. Then you've got the Adobe RGB, which is a wider color space than the sRGB, mainly used for business purposes or printing for businesses. And then you've got Apple RGB, which is the standard color space for for Macintosh. And you've got color match RGB, which is a slightly wider color space than sRGB, mainly used for printing for business purposes, and wide gamut RGB, which is a wider color space than the Adobe RGB. So normally, if you do a lot of printing, you might want to do a little bit more research into the color space that you want to use, but I would recommend just to keep it as sRGB. Or you could also go and choose this use shooting color space as work color space. What this will do, if you check this option, the color space specified within the camera when the image was shot will be set as the work color space. So you can either choose your camera's default or your operating system default. So here you've got also, it's similar. So the color match settings. So these settings are used if a profile is attached to your monitor that you are using. You can display an image in more faithful colors by setting their profile. So the sRGB is your standard color space for Windows. If you use the operating system settings, so this is the color profile set in Windows, will also be applied to DPP4. So I've got it set on that one. And then lastly, you've got a monitor profile. So you can select this profile and then it will open up all the available color profiles. So for example, I've got an Epson printer installed. I could possibly choose that color profile to match what's displaying on the screen. So that's by going here, monitor profile. Now here you've got printing profiles as well, so I can go ahead and select a profile that's attached to my printer. So I've got Epson profiles over here that came standard when I installed the printer, so I could go ahead and probably choose like Epson or sRGB or whatever I think. So I'm using Windows and Epson, so I probably would take this one. Now over here, you'll see rendering intense. Now over here, these two settings, you've got perceptual and relative colorimetric. So these two are a little bit complicated, but basically what I managed to find on them. So this relative colorimetric changes all the colors out of the gamut to the nearest color in the gamut. So many colors change to the same one. It does not change the colors in the gamut. So this is good when you are using any glossy media. So like when you are printing on the photo paper that's glossy, it's difficult to get smooth shadows with this relative colorimetric on matte media. So use this setting for any glossy printer paper that you are using. Now this one, the perceptual setting, it changes all the colors in the image in a proportional way so that they lie in the printer gamut. This also happens if the image does not contain out of gamut colors. So they recommend to use this with the matte media when you see blocking of shadow details. So if you're using media that's not glossy but matte, use perceptual over here. That's the best explanation of this I can give you. So basically remember, the bottom one is glossy, the top one is matte. All right, then over here, you've got something called the CMYK simulation profile. And over here, you'll find you have 4 different profiles. So this setting allows you to specify the simulation target to print the CMYK, which is the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black data. So the machine converts that CMYK data into a device-dependent color model based on the simulation target selected in the profile. So you've got 4 profiles to select from. So the Euro standard, basically it's a profile used for book printing in Europe. It simulates the standard European book printing. Then this one here, magazine color in Japan. This is a profile used for book and magazine printing in Japan. Then you've got this Japanese color 2001 type 3. This is profile becoming a standard in the Japanese printing industry. It simulates of Japan color standard printing, so it's very similar to that. And then you've got US web coated version 1. So this is a profile used for book printing in North America. It simulates the standard North American book printing. So if you're into printing a lot of things, use this profiles. Maybe I would probably, if I'm in Europe, I would choose European. And likewise over here, remember the bottom one is the glossy. This is for matte print. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and select none here because I don't really use them. All right, up next, we've got the view settings tab over here. All right, so this page is used to set the layout for the screen display. So what's displayed on your screen behind you, this is where you can control that. So firstly, you've got the thumbnail order where you can sort the default sort order of your thumbnails. So that's all the thumbnails that are displayed on your screen. You can choose to have them ordered by file name or extensions, or maybe your ratings that you've given them out of 5, or lenses used, ISO speed. So you've got a lot of different options here, and you can choose to order them ascending or descending. So I usually just stick with file name. And if you select this box over here, the order of the rearranged images is maintained starting the next time you select a folder. So when you have this checked, the next time you open a different folder, that order will still apply to it. So the next one here is the tooltips. So show tooltips. So if you've got this selected, I'll just show you what happens. So I'm just going to say, okay here. So tooltips, if I hover my mouse over one of these, you can see show thumbnails in a list, or show thumbnails with info, or show default thumbnail display. So that's where the setting, you can switch it off. If you switch that off, show tooltips, when I hover the mouse over, you will no longer see those tooltips over there. I find them to be quite useful, so I like to just leave them on. It does no harm. The next one is called Reset User Interface. Now use this to reset the user interface settings, including the screen displays. If you check this box, the next time that you start DPP, the interface settings will be reset. You have two options here, so you can reset the size or you can reset all the user interface settings. So if you reset size and positions only, that will just reset the thumbnail sizes if you've changed any kind of positioning. But if you do this one, reset all user interfaces, it will basically go back to how when you installed Canon DPP4, how all the user interface settings were. So use this to reset everything. If you've messed it up or if you lost something, you could always come here and use this to restore the defaults at startup. All right, up next, you've got image background color. So it says preview screen background color, and you've got 4 options here. And this one being the default, so it's not much colors to choose from really. You've got light gray all the way to black. So let's say I select the light gray one and I say, okay. Where you can see the difference here is if I go to the edit image window, you can see the background ribbons are light gray. If I go back to the tools, preferences, and say I change this to dark color, say okay. Now you can see the background becomes dark. That's all that this controls. Right now I'm going back to my preferences, and up next we've got image zooming. So this is whether you want to zoom in on an image by clicking it once or double clicking it. So what I mean by zooming, so if I say cancel here, let's say I go edit image. Since I've got the setting set to once, I can just click once and it zooms in on the image. Click again and it unzooms. Now, if I had to go and change that setting to click twice, you'll have to double click to zoom in. All right, now this setting here, HDR display. So you can check this HDR display to use the HDR images. HDR stands for high dynamic range images. So what this means is that DPP4 can display a wider dynamic range if your PC supports HDR. So my PC supports HDR because it's not grayed out, and I've got a 4K screen on this laptop. So I've definitely chosen this setting, but it depends, I guess, on your machine. All right, then over here, you've got HDR assisted display for movies, and you've got different priorities that you can choose from. So you've got exposure priority or your mid-tones, or your tones priority, which is your highlight. And this applies to movies captured with the EOS R5 and EOS R6. So basically this setting applies to the video output generated. It applies to the movies captured using either one of those two cameras, and you can decide if DPP should prioritize exposure or tones in the display. This option is for movies captured with one of those two cameras, and what HDR assist, what do you want to prioritize? All right, we've got 2 more pages to go. So the next one is called Properties Display Settings. The first thing you'll see on this page is the Use Recommended Settings button. Now pressing this will ask you if it's okay to apply the Canon DPP recommended settings for all property display settings. So you're basically telling the software to choose the best settings for you. Now if you don't want to fiddle around in here, just click that button and use the default settings. Basically, you click this and it asks you, do you want to apply the recommended settings? So you can say okay or cancel if you don't want to. Okay, next is the view settings. So over here, you can choose what you want to display on these thumbnails. So firstly, you've got the aperture or time value or ISO on thumbnails. So you can display additional information by having selected or deselected. Then you've got show icon on thumbnails to indicate edited recipes. So this one, when you edit a photo, it will show a little sign on the thumbnail to show that it's been edited. Here you've got show HDR icon if they are HDR, and show HDR icon on preview. So you can choose to leave them on. There's no harm. You might get more information on the thumbnails. All right, up next, you've got your preview properties font. All right, so over here, you can change the font. So by clicking browse here, you'll see it opens up, or you can actually change the font and the font style and the size that's displayed on the information about your photo. So let me demonstrate that real quick. So if I go ahead and open up a photo again, let's take this one. I'm going to say edit image, and then I'm going to click on this I for information. You can see it gives me the file name, the date the photo was taken, gives me the priority used and so on. And what I can do now by going to tools and preferences and changing the font on that display setting. So I'm going to change this to, let's say, I don't know, let's pick one that we can really see a difference. Let's take something like that and 18, say okay. Now you can see all this has changed. So the writing changed, and this is where you can decide what font to use. If you're not happy with your changes and you can't remember what it was, just click Restore Defaults and it brings it back to how it was in the beginning. All right, up next, this whole section over here basically controls what properties to display on the different thumbnail views. So if I click on this top one here, let's start with the first one. I'll just show you an example of each one so you know which one it applies to. So the first one is display settings for thumbnails with info. And you can see here that there's a selection of shooting date, camera model, image size, raw type, lens, focal length. I've selected those to select things, to add and take away things here. So this is what's going to be displayed. I can also move the order around, so I can move this, let's say up focal length. Let's make focal length second. And if I wanted to remove something, say I don't want to know the image size, I can remove that by clicking the remove button. If I wanted to add something different, like for example, I don't know, like shooting mode and meter mode, I can put that back in here, and then I can move this up and down, and I'll show you where this is applied. So this one is for display settings for thumbnails with info. So I'm going to say okay. If I go back here, and here you've got this option down there. It says show thumbnail with info. So if I click this, so over here, you'll see the thumbnail with info. So this is where we selected what we want to show. So you can see we've got the date and time, the focal length, the camera model, the shooting mode, and the lens and so on. So if I click this button here, it lets you show the properties as well of that. So over here, you can see we've added stuff. Say I want to add the ISO speed. I'll say okay. And now you can see it's got ISO as well. So that's where that specific setting comes from. Now up next, we've got one that says display settings for the thumbnails list. Now the thumbnails list one, it works in the same way. You can add and remove, move things around. But what this changes, take note, it says your file name, shooting date, camera model name, image size, aperture value, and so on. Now if I just say okay here and I change the view to thumbnail list, you can see this applies to the columns we can see here. So for this image, we can see the information in this column kind of view. Now what we could do, say we don't want to see the image size, for example, we could take away image size, remove that, say okay, and the image size is now gone. So that applies to the lists. All right, and lastly, you've got this one, display settings for preview properties. Here, the same principle applies. You've got a lot of things to choose from, and you can see we've got the file name, shooting date, and so on. If I click OK, where you'll see this settings is by clicking the edit image button. This is what you control over here. So you can add things to this, or you can take things away from this. This is your basically basic preview window in the edit image settings. Now, if I jump back to preferences, you could see we could, for example, I don't know, we want to add white balance. Let's add some color space. I'm just randomly adding things. Say okay, you can see it added a whole lot more information over here. Right, so back to preferences, we've got one more tab to look at, one more page. And over here, oh, by the way, if you're not happy with your defaults, you can either restore to what it was at default, or you can clear everything. So if I click restore defaults, you can see everything went back to how it was in the beginning. If I say clear all, it will take away everything. So clear all will remove all these and leave every profile blank basically. So you don't have to manually go and remove. You can just say clear all and it will take it all away from you. All right. And lastly, it is the survey page over here. So you've got just one setting in here and it's called the survey program. But this is a good one to have a look at. It says change settings. So if I click on this change settings button, you'll see what this actually tells you. It says Canon requests that the information below related to your Canon product be sent to Canon in case you're using a Canon product in China to the legally approved research company via the internet. So basically they're telling you that if you agree to this, they're going to send all this information here to Canon. And it does say here they can send this information to group companies as well. And the internet connection fee will be borne by the customer. So if you agree to this, you'll be sending the computer's operating system, CPU, the versions, the physical memory, language, display settings, device ID, etc. It's quite a bit of things, which country you log into. So if you're happy with it, say agree. If you do not want to send your information, do not agree. I usually do not agree. And then I just say okay. And now we've covered all the pages in the preferences. So I hope this video did help you out and that you learned at least a few new things. I know I did by doing some research into what these different options were. And that's all I've got for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope it helps you out. If you did like this video, do give me a thumbs up and do subscribe to this channel. I'll be aiming to make more videos in the future. So as always, thanks for watching. Stay safe, take care, and goodbye.